Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about applying integer operations. Our content objective is students will be able to apply integer operations to real-world situations and use a commutative property. The language objective is students will be able to write answers as complete sentences. And why am I learning this? Well, it's important for many real-world problems like finding the charge of an atom. So first, let's go over some background knowledge. Just remind ourselves the rule for subtraction. Subtracting numbers is the same as adding its additive inverse, or you're going to often hear me say add the opposite. So here, a minus b is the same as a plus negative b. 7 minus 10 is the same as 7 plus negative 10, etc. In a case like this, same idea. We're going to add the opposite. This is the same as a plus b. This is the same as negative 8 plus 5, and this is the same as 15 plus 6. So some background knowledge from 6th grade is the commutative property. The commutative property is basically when the order doesn't matter. You can flip-flop numbers around an operation and it will still give you the same answer. So we do have a commutative property of addition, meaning a plus b is the same as b plus a. So for example, 5 plus 7 is the same as 7 plus 5. 10 plus 3 is the same as 3 plus 10. Okay, the commutative property also works for multiplication, so same idea. 3 times 5 is the same as 5 times 3. 2 times 7 is the same as 7 times 2, etc. So this property is going to allow us to change the order of numbers in addition or multiplication problems. Again, because the order is not going to matter. But note, there isn't a commutative property of division or subtraction because the order of the numbers do matter. So for example, 2 minus 4 is not the same as 4 minus 2. I can't switch them around. Same as 10 divided by 5 is not the same as 5 divided by 10. They are not the same. So let's take a look at some examples. So sorry, there's a hanging S right there. It should be right here. So here we have 48 plus 71 plus 52. If I were to add these numbers, I don't necessarily have to add them from left to right. I could reorder them if I wanted to by using the commutative property. And typically what I do when I reorder them, I'm kind of regrouping them. So here, you can regroup them as 48 plus 52. Why would I want to do that? I can see this 8 and this 2, and I know 8 plus 2 is 10, so that makes it a little bit easier to add. In fact, if you do add these two numbers first, that would give you 100. And 100 plus 71, that's really easy. It's just 171. So using the commutative property kind of allows you to do a little bit more mental math. So it does help in that sense. So same thing here. Okay, if we use a commutative property, we can rearrange the numbers so we can add certain numbers first. It might be a little bit easier to kind of allow us to do mental math. So here I might want to do 4 plus 46 first because that's easy. That's going to be 50. And then I might reorder it to do 22 plus 78. That's going to be 100. So that's going to be easy. 50 plus 100 is 150. So once again, the commutative property is really helpful. So it's going to allow us to rearrange numbers. With whole numbers, it's nice to group certain numbers first because it's easier to compute. But you're going to find with positives and negatives, it's going to be helpful because you can group all the positives and group all the negatives and then compare them that way. So, for example, in this one here, it says find each sum. Explain why the sum is what you say. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange them so that all the negatives are together and all the positives together. So here, what I like to do is I simply circle them. Okay, I notice first of all they're all plus, so I'm not going to have to add the opposite, which is nice. Here it's a negative 12, a negative 6, and a negative 2, so all together, let's see, 12 plus 6, we have negative 18, and then plus a negative 2, we're going to have a total of negative 20. And then I'm just going to bring down this plus 15. So that helps. So basically, I've imagined me rearranging this to here and adding them together to combine them. So now it's just a matter of explaining how many more negatives are there than positives. Well, I can see there are more negatives. How many more negatives are there than positives? I would say there are 5. Now, if you need a little bit more support, I would suggest you say, okay, there are 20 more negatives. There are definitely more negatives. And 15 positives. How many more negatives are there than positives? Simply find the difference between the two, and that would lead you to our negative 5. But real quick, why is it negative? Because there are more negatives than there were positives. So I would say the sum is -5 because there are 5 more negatives than positives. Okay, well, what about a number line? Okay, so here what you could imagine is you're at -12, you're moving forward, but wait, instead of moving forward, we have to go -6, so now you have to go an extra, you're going to go backwards, an extra 6, which leaves you with -18. But now we're going forward 15, so that's going to take us to -3, and then we're going to go add, so which is forward, but it's a -2, go back, and that will leave us to -5. So a number line, again, I mean, wouldn't be the best choice, but it's a great way to visually see how your answer is getting to where it is. But comparing numbers is going to be, I think, the most efficient way for you right now. Okay, so for number 2, find each sum, explain why the sum is what you say. So for number 2, I'm going to do the same idea. I'm going to rearrange it in a sense by combining all of the positive numbers together and all of the negative numbers together. So if you want, you can kind of imagine I'm rearranging them, but to save myself some time, I'm just kind of regrouping them. So here, let's start with some positive. We have 1 here, and we have a positive 2 here. So how many positives are together? I have 3 positives. And then what about negatives? I have 3 negatives here, 10 negatives here. So I have altogether 13 negatives. So what I'm going to do now is ask myself, are there more positives or are there more negatives? Definitely more negatives. How many negatives are there? Well, there's 13 negatives, and then there's 3 positives. So how many more negatives are there than positives? I'm going to say 10. If you can't see it right away, simply find the difference to see how many more there are. So here, I'm going to say the sum is -10 because there are 10 more negatives than there are positives. Again, would I highly suggest you use a number line? No, it's a great way to visualize, but it's not going to be the most efficient way, especially when numbers get larger, like this one. So for number 3, I would like you to go ahead and pause the video and try this one by yourself. Okay, so let's see how well we did. I'm going to go ahead and use a commutative property to kind of rearrange the numbers in a sense to see how many negatives we have. We have 250 negatives here, 100 negatives here, so altogether we have 350 negatives. And then for positives, we have 200 positives here, 220 positives here, so altogether we have 420 positives. So to get the sum, I'm going to say there are more positives. Okay, you're not going to write this in your answer, but I'm just marking it so that I know that I've taken care of the sign. There are 420 positives. How many negatives are there? Well, there are 350 negatives. So how many more positives are there than negatives? Some of you can do this in your head, but if you need to, simply find the difference between the two. And you're going to get 70. So I would say the sum is 70. Why? Because there are 70 more negatives. Sorry, there are 70 more positives than there are negatives. So moving on to number 4. Okay, explain why the sum is what you say. So here we go. For number 4, go ahead and pause the video and try this one by yourself again. So for number 4, I'm just going to go ahead and use commutative property to kind of rearrange the numbers in a sense. So here we have 21 negatives and 35 negatives. So altogether we have a total of, let's say, 56 negatives. As for positive, we have 18 positives here, 33 positives. So far, let's see how much that is. That's going to be 51 positives plus another 19 positives. That's going to give me a total of 70 positives, so I'll put plus 70. Are there more negatives or are there more positives? Definitely going to go with positive, so my answer is positive. So since there's 70 positives, how many negatives are there? 56 negatives. How many more positives than negatives? Some of you compute this in your head, otherwise you're going to have to find a difference between them, leaving you with 14 positives. So I'm going to say the sum is 14 because there are 14 more positives than there are negatives. So notice, we're always comparing the amount of positives with negatives. Okay, so now we're going to be asked to write a numerical expression and then find the sum. So for number 5, it says Jenna has $125 in her account. She deposits $45 and withdraws $80. Later, she returns to withdraw another $40 and deposits a check for $250. So here's something that you have to be very careful about, okay? When we're talking about withdrawals and deposits, we're thinking about what's happening to her bank account. Is she getting more or is she getting less? Okay, so here, since she's starting with 125, I'm going to write 125 first. Since she's depositing money, let's think, is she getting more money in her account or less money in account? She's getting more because she's putting money in, so we're going to go ahead and put plus 45. And then she withdraws. Well, here, if she's taking money out, because that's what a withdrawal is. If she takes out $80 from a bank account, that means she's losing $80. So we're going to put minus $80. Later, she returns to withdraw another $40. So again, since she's withdrawing money, she's taking money out of the account. So that's going to be a minus 40. And if she deposits a check for $250, that means she's putting money into her account. That means she's getting more. How much more? She's adding $250 to that. So this here is going to be my numerical expression. But we're not done. They also asked us to find the sum. So just like in the previous examples, I'm going to use a commutative property to kind of combine the positives together and the negatives together. So here we have 125 positives, 45 positives. I'm going to work this out as I go. And that's going to be 170. And then we have 200. Whoops. Include the positive sign. Notice I'm always circling the sign in front because this tells me that it's a positive, okay? Some students like to circle the sign after. That's not what makes it positive or negative. We always look in front of the number to determine if it's a positive or a negative. So here we're going to combine it with another 250, which is going to leave us with 420 positives. Then here we have 80 negatives with 40 negatives gives us a total of 120 negatives. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to negative 120 negatives. So are there more positives or are there more negatives? I'm definitely going to say there are more positives. There's 420 positives and there's 120 negatives. So how many more positives are there than negatives? Again, some of you can do it in your head really well. Otherwise, you're going to have to find the difference and say that there is 300 more positives than there are negatives. So if it's a positive, what does that mean? Does she have a positive amount or does she owe her account some money? Since it's positive, I'm going to say that she actually owns the $300. So I'm going to say Jenna will have $300 left in her account. And please understand, your sentence might vary a little bit different than mine. We might not use the same exact words, but as long as you state that she has $300 at the end, you are correct. Okay, so now let's try another problem. It says, number 6, write a numerical expression. So again, we're going to have to do that, and then find the sum. Last week, Julio made deposits of $84, $19, and $29 into his checking account. He then wrote checks for $53 and $38. What is the overall change in Julio's bank account balance? For this one, I'd like you to pause the video and try this one by yourself. Okay, so let's see how well we did. Well, first of all, Julio made deposits. Deposits, again, what's happening to his checking account? Is he losing or is he gaining money? He's gaining money, so 84, 19, and 29, those are all going to be positive. So I'm going to say 84 plus 19 plus 29. Then it says he then wrote checks for $53 and $38. If he's writing a check, that means he's giving money away, which means he no longer has it. So he is losing money. So for this, we're going to subtract 53 and we're going to subtract 38. So notice here we do have some subtraction. If you recall from the previous lesson, what do we do when there's subtraction? We have to add the opposite. So here I'm going to go ahead and change this to plus. The opposite of 53 is negative 53. Here we're going to change this to plus. The opposite of 38 is negative 38. So real quick, let me rewrite this as 84 plus 19 plus 29 plus a negative 53 plus a negative 38. So now, we're going to do the same thing we did before. Using the commutative property, we're going to go ahead and, in a sense, combine all of our numbers here. We didn't actually really have to use the commutative property because they're all grouped right here. So 84 plus 19, let's figure that out. 84 plus 19, currently have 103. We'll add another 29 to that. And that's going to leave us with 132 plus, and then we're going to see how many negatives there are. There's 53 here, 38 here. So altogether we have 91. So negative 91. So are there more negatives or are there more positives? I'm definitely going to say there's more positive. How many more positives are there than negatives? Well, there's 132 positives and there's 91 negatives. So how many more positives are there than negatives? Well, let's find the difference. 13 minus 9 is 4. So I would say there are 41 more positives than there are negatives. So what is Julio's account balance? I would say Julio's account balance is $41. And yes, you're going to want to put the dollar sign because that's the unit of the number. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 7. It says, write a numerical expression that represents a situation. Solve the expression using any method and write your answer as a complete sentence. Tom left school and walked 5 blocks east. Charlie walked the same distance west. How far apart are the two friends? First of all, I want to give you a visual, okay? If we look at the cardinal directions, here's north, east, south, west. Some people use never eat soggy waffles to kind of remember that. Do whatever works for you. So here, it seems as though Tom went east 5 blocks. So you went this way. 5 blocks. That's Tom. But Charlie from school, this is the school, he went 5 blocks west. Okay? And they're asking how far apart are these two friends? Here you can kind of visually see if there are 5 blocks here, 5 blocks in between. Obviously, it's 10 blocks altogether. But how can we do that without a visual? How could we think of it? Well, if we're trying to find the distance between them, or essentially finding the difference between the numbers, okay? So what you could do is think, okay, well, if Tom went to the right, you can kind of think of that as a positive, so that's a positive 5. And we're going to find the difference between the numbers, so that means I'm subtracting. Well, if Charlie went west, you can kind of think of that as a negative. This was a number line, right? If this is 0, this is positive, this is negative. So we're subtracting a negative 5. So this would be my numerical expression, 5 minus a negative 5. But we're not only asked to do that, we're actually asked to answer the question. So here, I'm going to go ahead and add the opposite since it is subtraction. So here we're going to add the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5, which gives me 10. So how far apart are these two friends? I'm going to say the friends are 10 blocks apart. Okay, and that is it to that problem. So let's move on to number 8. Says, again, write a numerical expression that represents a situation, solve the expression using any method, and write your answer as a complete sentence. Number 8, Ricardo's grandmother flew from Buenos Aires, Argentina to Minnesota to visit some friends. When Ricardo's grandmother left Buenos Aires, the temperature was 84 degrees. When she arrived in Minnesota, it was negative 7 degrees. What was the temperature change for Ricardo's grandmother? Since they're asking us to find the change, we are technically being asked to find the difference between the two. So how would I write this expression? Well, I would write 84 minus a negative 7. So this would be my expression, my numerical expression. But we're not just asked to do that. We're asked to actually answer the question was, what was the temperature change for Ricardo's grandmother? So since I do see subtraction, what I'm going to do is add the opposite. So here, Subtraction turns into plus. The opposite of negative 7 is 7. So just add these two numbers. 84 plus 7 is going to give us 91. So what is the temperature change for Ricardo's grandmother? I'm going to say the temperature change is, and sorry, excuse my sloppy handwriting, is 91 degrees. Don't forget, we want to put Fahrenheit, because if we don't know if it's Fahrenheit or Celsius, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so now moving on to number 9. I'd like you to pause the video and try this one by yourself. So let's see how well we do. It says, the elevator started on the 8th floor, went up 5 floors, and went down 5 floors. What floor is it on now? Okay, so for the numerical expression, since we started on the 8th floor, we're going to put 8. It went up 5 floors, so that makes me think of plus 5. And then it went down 5 floors, so that makes me think of minus 5. So this is my numerical expression, but again, we're asked to answer the question, so I'm going to go ahead and evaluate it. So now we have 8 plus 5 minus 5. According to order of operations, you have to go in order from left to right whenever they're both addition and subtraction. Okay, so here, working my way from left to right, 8 plus 5, that's going to give me 13. 13 minus 5 is going to give me 8. So I'm going to say it is on the 8th floor. Okay, and let's not forget that period. Okay, so now moving on to number 10. Number 10 is tricky, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one with you. The temperature rose 13 degrees Fahrenheit between noon and 5 p.m. and then fell 7 degrees Fahrenheit from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. If the temperature at noon is 75 degrees, what would the temperature be at 10 p.m.? So remember, it said here the temperature rose 13 degrees between noon and 5 p.m. And here they mentioned what the temperature was at noon. So starting with the temperature at noon, which was 75 degrees, we can go ahead and say since it rose 13 degrees, we're going to add 13 degrees. And then it fell 7 degrees Fahrenheit, so we're going to subtract 7 degrees. And that's all there was to it. So now I do see subtraction, so whenever we see subtraction, we need to remember to add. The opposite of 7 is a negative 7. And then we're just going to go ahead and essentially combine like terms. That's something we're going to do in 8th grade as well. So here we're going to say 75 with a positive 13. How many positives are there? We're going to say 75 plus 13. That's going to give me 88 positives plus 7 negatives. So are there more positives or negatives? Definitely going to say positives. There's 88 positives and 7 negatives. So how many more positives are there than negatives? Simply find the difference. And I would say there's 81 more positives. So the temperature is still positive. I'm going to say the temperature at 10 p.m. is 81 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so now moving on. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and try number 11 by yourself. So it says here, Paula was standing on top of a cliff 35 feet above sea level. I'm just going to draw you a quick picture. Here's sea level. So she's on a cliff. How far up is it? It's 35 feet. Oops, that's not 5 feet. Okay, above the sea level. She watched her friend Juan jump from the cliff to a depth of 12 feet into the water. So here's Juan. He's going to jump in and he's going to go down 12 feet into the water. How far apart are these two friends? So here, because we're trying to find the distance between them, we're going to have to find the difference between these two values. Okay, so first we know that Paula started at 35 feet above sea level, so that's going to be positive. And since we weren't trying to find this complete distance between the two, we're going to have to find the difference between these two values. So we're going to go ahead and subtract. Well, since Juan jumped into the water and went down 12 feet, that would be a negative 12. So this is our numerical expression. I do see subtraction, so we know we're going to have to add the opposite of negative 12, which was going to be a positive 12. So here, what's 35 plus 12? Don't overthink it. It is 47. So how far apart are the two friends? I would say the friends are 47. And what's the units? It is in feet. So I want to say feet apart. Okay, so now moving on to the next problems. Number 12. Go ahead and pause the video and try number 12 by yourself. Okay, so for number 12, it says the carbon atom has 6 protons and 6 electrons. What is the charge of the atom? Hint, protons have a positive charge, electrons have a negative charge. So first of all, 6 protons must mean, since it's a positive charge, a positive 6. And 6 electrons, since electrons are negative, I'm going to go ahead and add a negative 6 for those electrons. So here, so real quick, backtrack. This is my numerical expression, but I'm asked to answer the question, which was, what is the charge of the atom? So I'm going to have to combine these two charges. There's not more positives than negatives necessarily because they're exactly the same. So you can just state 6 positives, 6 negatives. How many more positives are there than negatives? 0. Okay. So here I would say the charge of the atom is 0, which can be seen as neutral. And there you go. Okay, so now moving on to the last problem. Go ahead, pause the video and try number 13 by yourself. Okay, so for number 13, it says the Broncos got possession of the football on the 20-yard line. They ran for an 8-yard gain. The next play was a 3-yard loss. What is the field position after the 2 plays? Well, first, we know that they started at the 20-yard line. Okay, they gained 8 yards, so that's plus 8. But then they lost 3 yards, so that's going to be, I'm going to go ahead and say plus negative 3. Or some of you may just see it as, okay, well, we subtract 3. Okay, by adding a negative 3, that saves me a step. But here, let me just show you real quick. If you didn't see that, since it's subtraction, we're going to add. The opposite of 3 is negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and answer the question and say here there are 28 positives plus 3 negatives. Are there more positives or are there more negatives? Definitely more positives. There's 28 positives and 3 negatives. So how many more positives than negatives? I would say 25. But I need to answer the question, what is their field position? Their field position is at the 25-yard line. Okay, guess what? That actually concludes the lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, until next time, bye.